Chapter 47-36. Seeing this, Hao-er's eyes flashed. These mercenaries were not weak, and he only managed to kill them when they were unprepared. Once they were on their guard, there was no chance for him to strike again. Since he could not win, he could only run. Thus, when he saw Fang Ming's palm strike and hidden weapon coming at him, he immediately dodged. His figure quickly dashed 10 meters away. His figure paused as he swept a glance at the mercenaries and the Sky Sun sect members who were watching the show. In the next moment, he changed his original direction of leaving the forest and quickly dashed into the depths of the forest. Chase! Seeing this, the mercenaries immediately shouted and quickly chased after him. After they left, the people from the Sky Sun sect also walked out. The elder and the middle-aged man saw this scene and shook their heads slightly. It's a pity that this child won't survive. These mercenaries were people who carried out missions in the forest all year round. They were skilled and used to fighting in the forest. No matter how smart the child was, it would be difficult for him to survive under their hands. Let's go. The elder turned around and led the disciples in another direction. Some of the disciples looked back with pity in their eyes. However, they did not say anything and just quietly followed the elder. On the other side, Hao-er led them into the depths of the forest. He swept in front, his small figure shuttling through the forest like a shadow that could not be caught. This little bastard runs really fast. When I catch him, I'll skin him alive. A mercenary cursed as his agile figure quickly swept through the forest. They were people who lived in the forest. In a forest like this where they avoided the trees, their speed was considered extremely fast. Now, they were left behind by the little brat, which was really infuriating. This kid seems to be leading us in. What is he trying to do? The leader of the mercenaries said doubtfully, feeling that something was not right. What can he do? He's just a little brat. What can he do? Another person said disapprovingly. Hearing this, the leader of the mercenaries suppressed the doubts in his heart. Indeed, he was just a little brat. Moreover, there were no strong people secretly guarding him. If they killed him, then so be it. What could happen? It was probably just him overthinking things. What could a 10-year-old kid do? Even if he could really pull some tricks and lure them into the forest, he would only have a dead end. Thus, everyone sped up and continued to chase. They all knew that this brat had many treasures on him. Now that they had set their eyes on him, they naturally couldn't let him leave. However, right at this moment, they saw the little ghost that had been moving forward suddenly stop. Moreover, it was facing them as if it was waiting for them to come closer. Ha 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 ha. Brat, can't you run anymore? A mercenary laughed and stared at the child in front of him, revealing a bloodthirsty and cruel sneer. You want to run? Didn't you want to escape? Try running again. Escape? Who said I was going to run away? Hao said coldly. A cold light flashed in his eyes. I just don't want you to have a chance to escape. Chapter 47-37. Hao-er looked at them and opened his mouth slightly. He called out coldly, Silver Wolf. As soon as his voice fell, a ray of light shot out from his body, and a majestic silver wolf leaped and appeared in front of the mercenaries. A woo! With a howl of a wolf, the oppressive aura from its body spread out, instantly enveloping the entire area. Once the powerful and frightening aura of a sacred beast spread out, even those mercenaries who possessed decent strength turned pale at this moment. Their entire bodies stiffened involuntarily, and some of the weaker ones even lost control of their legs and knelt down on the ground. Sacred beast! They widened their eyes in shock and looked incredulously at the sacred beast that appeared in front of them. At this moment, they finally understood why this brat had lured them here. It turned out that it was to summon a sacred beast to kill them. Whoosh! Hao-er took advantage of their moment of shock. Taking advantage of the silver wolf's oppressive aura, a long sword appeared in his hand. The biting cold sword aura followed his figure and attacked. His small figure was like an Azura, reaping their lives. the Sky Sun sect elder and the rest who were heading in another direction could not help but stop and look back when the wolf howl sounded. "Elder, what's wrong?" the middle-aged man asked. "Didn't you hear it?" The elder frowned and looked at him. The middle-aged man smiled embarrassedly. "I heard it. It's just a wolf howl. Moreover, it should be very far away from us." "No, this wolf howl is a little different. Moreover, we've already passed through this area. There shouldn't be any more ferocious beasts." The elder pondered. No one knew what he had thought of, but his expression changed. He immediately said, "Let's go. Let's go back and take a look." With that, he had already rushed out and returned. The people behind him did not know what had happened. They looked at each other and quickly followed. On the other side, Hao-Er wiped the blood off his sword and kept it. He then went forward and took all the valuable items from the mercenaries on the ground. He let the silver wolf pile the corpses together. Finally, he took out the corpse-dissolving water from the space and sprinkled it on the corpses. Seeing the corpses on the ground turn into a pool of blood and seep into the ground, the silver wolf's voice was heard. "Someone is coming, and there are quite a few of them. You go back first," Hao-Er said. He let it go back to the space first, then put away the things and left quickly. As a sacred beast, the silver wolf's howl was naturally extraordinary. The disciples of the Sky Sun sect might not be able to distinguish it, but the old man might not be able to. In order to avoid trouble, he even cleaned up the corpses on the ground. Not long after he left, the elder of the Sky Sun sect arrived first. However, when he arrived, he only saw some marks on the ground and the smell of blood that had yet to dissipate in the air. "Elder? What do you think? Did you find anything?" The middle-aged man hurried over with his disciples. He looked left and right, but there was nothing around. The elder stared at the ground thoughtfully. He stroked his beard and said, "Someone must have died here, but the corpse has been disposed of." Chapter 47:38. The elder was silent as he looked around but could not figure out anything. In the end, he said, "Let's go." Then, he turned around and left with his men. Only he knew that there was a question in his heart that had not been solved. 2 days later, in a town, a few rogue cultivators were resting in a tea house. One of them sighed, "I didn't expect this, I really didn't expect this. The few of us actually fell into the hands of a little girl one day. Isn't that so? That little girl is too cunning. She's such a young girl and she's obviously so obedient and cute. Why is she so scheming?" Another person chimed in. Whenever he thought of how they fell into the hands of that little girl, he would shake his head and sigh. "I don't feel good that we can't find that little girl. Which family is she from? Cloud 7? Could Cloud be her family's surname?" Shen Shichi rubbed his chin and said, "Hee, old Shen, you don't have to think about it. That little girl is just like a little fox. I'm guessing that the name she gave us was just a casual lie." Another person patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile, "You tell us, what should we do next? We can't find this person and we don't know where she went. I guess we won't be able to find her in the future." "Can't find her?" He raised his eyebrows and revealed a strange smile. "Just because we can't find her doesn't mean that others can't find her." "Oh. What idea do you have?" The few of them looked at him and asked with interest. "Post a bounty notice. I don't believe that little girl can fly away." He laughed and his eyes lit up. He looked at the few of them and asked, "What do you think?" "My idea? Posting a bounty notice is good. When the time comes, as long as we see that little girl, we can capture her first. But she's just a little kid. Isn't it too much to use a bounty notice?" One of them asked hesitantly. Hearing that, Shinshichi glanced at them and laughed. "That little fox is just a little fox. If she's really simple and ordinary, would we have fallen into her hands? Would we have let her slip away from under our noses? Moreover, I feel that even if we put out the bounty list, those people might not be able to catch her. That little girl is very smart. At most, it can only buy us some time and let us know where that little girl is. Another person thought for a moment and said, if we want to use the bounty list, I think we can say that we're looking for a little sister who secretly ran away from home. This way, those who make a move on her won't hurt her, and they'll have a sense of propriety. After all, she's a little girl, so they can't go too far. Okay, then let's do it this way. Shinshichi smiled and said, hurry up. After drinking the tea, let's go and do the work. At this time, still didn't know that these people still hadn't given up and were still thinking of capturing her. At this moment, she was sitting in a corner of the market in another small town. She was eating steaming buns while looking at an old woman who was milking a few goats not far away. Goat milk. Moreover, it was freshly squeezed. As she watched, she couldn't help but lick her lips, revealing a greedy look. After eating the bun, she wiped the corner of her mouth, clapped her hands, and walked forward. Granny, how much is this goat's milk? Chapter 47:39. I want a bottle, Yu said with a smile. Then, she took out 10 gold coins and handed them to the old woman. Okay. Do you want this bottle? Or do you want to see me squeeze another bottle? The old woman asked. I'll take this bottle. She saw her squeezing the milk here just now. There shouldn't be any problem. Okay. Then, take it. Go back and ask your parents to boil it for you. It'll taste better with a little salt, the old woman suggested. Okay, I know. She had drunk it before. Then, she took the bottle of goat's milk and spent a few gold coins to borrow the kitchen of the restaurant to boil the goat's milk. Then, she drank a bowl of goat's milk and took the rest with her. She walked around the town outside and bought some things. When she was about to continue her journey, she saw a man holding a picture and pasting it on a wall. After that man left, she went forward to take a look. Then, her eyes widened. She quickly jumped up and tore off the picture when no one was paying attention. Then, she stuffed it into her clothes. Those bastards want to catch me with the bounty board. She wrinkled her nose and lowered her head to look at the dress she was wearing. Her gaze shifted and a sly smile appeared on her small face. In the next moment, she flashed away. At the same time, bounty boards were quickly posted in the surrounding towns. Mu Chen, who had just entered the town, frowned slightly when he saw the picture on the wall. He walked forward and looked at it carefully. The more he looked, the colder his expression became. After entering the town, he went to a place to rest. Then, he took out his communication jade to see if his sister had encountered any problems. After a while, he received a message from his communication jade. After hearing that his sister had sent him a message, he was relieved. He only told her to be careful and told her the location of the town where he was now. As expected, the two of them did not take the same path. The town they were in was also very far away. It could be said that it was almost impossible for them to travel together at the same time. Moreover, their master had already made it clear that they should travel back by themselves. When Yu went on the road again, she had changed out of her beautiful dress. Instead, she was wearing a beggar's dress. She used to hear her father talk about her mother's past, so she knew that her mother used to be very naughty. She didn't like beautiful clothes, but she liked to dress up as a beggar and wander around. It was rare to have such an opportunity. She also wanted to learn from her mother and become a little beggar. Moreover, even if those people appeared in front of her, they probably wouldn't be able to recognize her. Shinshichi and the rest did not expect the little girl to disguise herself as a beggar. At this moment, they were listening to the news that they had seen the little girl they were looking for. Some even said that they had caught her and were waiting for them to go over. However, as they listened to the news coming from all over, they couldn't help but look at each other and say, should we add another rule? Should we teach them a lesson for passing off falsehood as truth? No, it should be that the person who posted the bounty list didn't do a good job. They sent the news without checking. It seems that they didn't care much about this matter. Shinshichi narrowed his eyes and sneered, Maybe he thinks we are ordinary rogue cultivators. Looks like we have to do something to get results faster. Chapter 4740. The next day, Shinshichi and others appeared in the small town where you had stopped before. They walked around the small town and said, according to the news, that little girl was last seen in this small town. Now it seems she shouldn't be in this town. However, this place is actually easy to find. After leaving this town, there is only one way to go south. Since that is the case, let's go. Going south is that big city. Thinking about it, that little girl ought to be a descendant of that city's clan. The difficulty of finding her should be reduced a bit. Another person said with a smile. Then looking at the few people beside him, he also continued to move forward. At this time, perhaps you felt that they wouldn't be able to find her, so she slightly slowed down her pace. Until evening, when she saw the sky was about to darken, she also saw a village in front of her. The surroundings of the village were planted with corn, so she thought to go there to rest for a while and conveniently look for some food. But because she was wearing beggar's clothing, before she could even get close, some brats of the village threw stones to drive her away. Go, go, go. Smelly beggar, you are not allowed to come to our village. The children of the village threw stones while scolding and driving away that little beggar. You was dazed for a moment. Seeing the stones were thrown towards her, she promptly dodged and retreated while shouting, "Don't throw stones at me, don't throw stones at me. Little beggar, go away. You are not allowed to come to our village. Quickly go away, otherwise I will bite you." A brat shouted, then unexpectedly turned around and shouted, big yellow, quickly come out." You looked and saw a big yellow dog running towards her while barking at her. Seeing that big yellow dog running towards her, she didn't think and quickly retreated while shouting, "Control your dog. Otherwise I will kill it and eat it. Big yellow, bite him. Big yellow, bite him." The devilish brats were shouting and clapping their hands with excitement written all over their faces. You turned around and ran. After running for some distance, she saw an old beggar walking towards that village while holding a branch as a crutch. Seeing this, she reminded him, the children there don't allow beggars to approach, and there is also a big yellow dog that bites people. Old beggar, quickly run. The old beggar looked at her and smiled. You run first, this old beggar will get some food. Then, he continued to walk forward. Upon seeing this, you didn't pay any more attention to him. She first ran towards the mountain path. After running for quite a distance, and seeing that big yellow dog didn't chase after her, she went to the woods beside the mountain path to find a place to rest. These kids are really bad. They even bully people. She murmured and wiped her sweat with her sleeve. She took out some water from her space to drink and then took out some food from her space. Seeing there were only pastries and meat jerky, she bitterly wrinkled her small face and silently sighed, "I want to eat, don't want to eat pastries and meat jerky." When all was said and done, she always casually ate pastries and meat jerky on the way, so she stuffed those things back and took out a fruit to eat. Afterwards, she jumped on the tree to sleep. Chapter 4741. So fragrant. You sniffed and inhaled that fragrance pervading in the air. Her eyes shone as she followed the fragrance. Under a tree in the grove, an old beggar was drinking wine and cooking meat. In front of him, there was a pot with a missing corner, which was still emitting steam and fragrance. The fire under the pot was also still burning. Clearly, the meat in the pot was still not cooked. Old beggar? When you saw that beggar, a trace of surprise appeared in her beautiful eyes. She trotted forward and sniffed the fragrance beside the pot. Smelling that fragrance, she smiled. "This is the smell. Old beggar, what meat are you cooking? Why is it so fragrant?" She acted as if she was familiar with this place and rubbed against the wood where the old beggar was sitting. Then stretching her neck, she looked at the still cooking meat under the cover, and just like a greedy cat, she swallowed her saliva. Old beggar glanced at her and said, you didn't get anything to eat? No, they released their dogs to bite me, so I ran away. I didn't even get close to that village. Shook her head and said. Then staring at the fragrant pot, she asked, Old beggar, can you share some of the meat in this pot with me to eat? I am also hungry. The old beggar used a branch to poke at the flames. His aged voice was neither fast nor slow, and there was a hint of indifference. You are a beggar, and I am also a beggar. Why should I share some food with you? I can give you money. Looked at him with a beaming smile, then took out a gold coin. I will give you money, you share my food, I won't take advantage of you. Old beggar glanced at her, then stretched out his skinny hand and took that gold coin, then said, Did you bring a bowl? Brought. Answered with a beaming smile. Her voice was loud and clear, then she took out a bowl from her bosom. Old beggar opened the cover, and a burst of meat fragrance assailed their nostrils. The fragrance spread in all direction, making even more gluttonous. She couldn't help but swallow her saliva, and holding the bowl in her hand, she also moved closer. Hand it over. The old beggar shouted. He scooped a spoonful of meat and poured it into Ur's bowl. After that he scooped another spoonful for himself. After that he covered the lid of the bowl. He used 2 small branches as chopsticks to eat the meat. Had her own chopsticks, so holding that bowl of meat, she sat back and started eating. After a mouthful of meat entered her mouth, rich meat fragrance filled her mouth. Because of the scalding hot meat, she slightly opened her small mouth and exhaled, then once again lowered her head to eat. The old beggar drank the wine and ate the meat. From time to time, he would glance at the little beggar next to him. Seeing that her bowl was empty, he would add a big spoon for her. Ate no less than 3 bowls of meat before stopping. She hugged her stomach and leaned against the big tree while lightly exhaling. With her little face full of satisfaction, she curiously asked, Old beggar, what kind of meat is this? Why was it so fragrant? I've eaten a lot of meat, but I've never eaten meat stewed like this. It's so fragrant. This is dog meat. The old beggar sipped his wine and said unhurriedly. Was startled, and almost instinctively whispered, Dog meat? This is dog meat? Where did you get this dog? Finished speaking, don't know what she thought, but her eyes opened wide in astonishment. Chapter 47-42. Suddenly bitterly said, I just haven't eaten dog meat. I have eaten spirit beast meat, all kinds of spirit beast meat, but I have never eaten dog meat. I didn't know that dog meat actually tasted like this, and. While speaking, she couldn't help but lower her head and clench her little hands. And what? Old beggar asked. Helplessly sighed like a little adult and said, It's quite delicious, moreover the meat you stewed is really very fragrant. But, as long as she thought that she was eating dog meat, she felt somewhat uncomfortable in her heart. This is a native dog, stewing it is best. He stretched his waist and said, Old beggar, I have eaten a lot of dog meat, and this stewing method is something that others can't learn. You are also lucky today, otherwise you won't be able to eat this old beggar's dog meat. Looked inside the pot, there was still some left. It would be a pity to throw it away. So she asked, Then what about the rest? Rest assured, there's no share for you. Old beggar will eat it in the second half of the night. He said, hugging his wine gourd, he leaned against the tree and fell asleep. Early morning of the next day, when walked out of the mountain path and was preparing to continue forward, she saw old beggar leisurely walking behind her. She stopped and said with a smile, Old beggar, you are also going to the city? Then we are going in the same direction. Let's go together. We can also chat on the road. She felt that Cloud Sky Mountain was not far away, so her mentality also relaxed, and was no longer in a hurry. Old beggar is used to being alone, one more person or one less person doesn't matter. He said, while using a branch as a crutch, walking very slowly. Both of them walked along the same road. Was chattering non-stop all along the way just like a little bird. The old beggar was only quietly listening to her. Occasionally he would respond, but the whole way was calm and there was nothing wrong. However, at noon, when an old beggar sat down to rest and drink water, they saw those few people who were like ghosts, unexpectedly riding their few ostentatious contracted beasts, coming towards them. Was so scared that she choked on the water, and promptly shrank behind old beggar. When the old beggar saw this, he glanced at those people without leaving a trace. Then, he unhurriedly looked away and continued to drink the wine in his hand. That sly girl ran pretty fast. We didn't even see her shadow all the way here. The man riding on the contract beast said as he looked around. When he saw the two beggars, one old and one young, sitting on the mountain path, he didn't stop and looked away. That little girl is very cunning. Perhaps she has already returned to her family. But, once we reach that city, even if she hides in her family and doesn't come out, I can still find her. Shinshichi smiled as he spoke. His gaze fell on the two beggars resting by the roadside, one old and one young. He only glanced at them once before retracting his gaze. He did not even think that the young beggar was the little girl they were looking for. After all, from their point of view, that little girl must have an extremely good background and was doted on. Moreover, she was still a little girl, so how could she have any relation with a dirty little beggar? Little beggar, I'll reward you with something to eat. Shinshichi raised his hand, and two flatbread flew out and landed in the bosom of the little beggar. Chapter 47-43. She didn't speak, merely after receiving the flatbread, she lowered her head and nodded, as if she was expressing her thanks. Old Shin, don't throw your things like this, be careful not to scare that little beggar. A man behind said, then looking at that little beggar, he laughed. Hearing this, Shinshichi, who had originally moved his gaze away, again looked back, and saw that little beggar had lowered her head, moreover she didn't speak, only nodding her head. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows, and just when he was about to speak, he heard the happy and grateful voice of that old beggar. Many thanks, sirs, my granddaughter is mute and also timid, so I thank sirs on her behalf. Old beggar said. Mute? Her's body stiffened, but she didn't say anything, merely curled up beside the old beggar, and kept lowering her head, while tightly hugging those two flatbread. Well, it's not a big matter. Oh, that's right, did you meet a 5-year-old little girl? She was wearing a pink little dress, and had a strange and lovable appearance. Shinshichi asked. Yes, that little girl also gave this old man a gold coin. Old beggar said, then took out that gold coin that you had given him last night and spread it out in his palm. Seeing this, the eyes of Shinshichi and others shined, then looking at each other, they laughed. Like I said. That little girl didn't have any other way to go, so I reckon she wants to return to the city. Old beggar, how long has that little girl walked? Another person asked. This old man met her yesterday. Last night this old man and granddaughter rested in the forest, so I don't know about that little girl. Old beggar said, then shook his head. Let's go. If we speed up a bit, I reckon we can still catch up. Shinshichi said with a smile, then urged his contract beast forward. All of them rode on their beasts, causing dust and sand to fly all over the mountain path. Only until all of them had left and couldn't be seen, raised her head and lightly exhaled, then she lightly patted her chest with her hand. So dangerous. She gasped for breath, then looking towards old beggar, she handed over one flatbread to him, then said with a beaming smile, Old beggar, your reaction ability is pretty good. Here. The old beggar glanced at her and said, you can keep it for yourself. As he spoke, he stood up with the stick in one hand and said, those people are not ordinary rogue cultivators. How did you provoke them? You don't know. Those people are bored out of their minds. They're just looking for something to do. Glared, and somewhat helplessly said, I didn't provoke them, but they themselves came to provoke me, and kept on following me, annoying me to death, causing me to pretend to be a beggar, but still kept on chasing me. I don't know what they want to do. Then why are you still walking forward? Aren't you afraid of meeting them? The old beggar asked. I have to go forward, because I want to go to the city ahead. She laughed and said, they won't recognize me. Didn't they not recognize me just now? But I reckon I can't go together with you. If you are not in a hurry to go to the city, then walk slowly. I still have to rush back. While speaking, her figure flew several meters, then waving her hand towards him, she said, Old beggar, goodbye. Next time if I can meet you again, I will invite you to eat a big meal. Her voice gradually faded, and her figure gradually went far away. Chapter 47-44. 2 days later, while Shinshichi and the rest were searching for you, in the city, you had already arrived at the foot of Cloud Sky Mountain. Looking at the familiar place, a joyful smile appeared on her small face. With light steps, she dashed up the mountain like a little bird. It was impossible for outsiders to enter the Cloud Sky Mountain. Not only was there an array in the mountain, but there was also a barrier in the area where the Cloud Sky Mountain was located. Outsiders only knew that the Cloud Sky Mountain was in this area, but they could not find the exact location of the Cloud Sky Mountain. Am I the first to come back? You asked as she walked. When she thought that she might be the first to come back, her face involuntarily revealed a happy smile. Sister. Just then, a voice sounded. She was startled and looked up to see her brother's figure walking out of the forest path. When she saw him, she could not help but widen her eyes in disbelief. Brother? Why are you here? Mu Chen revealed a smile and said, I arrived before you. I arrived in the morning and saw that you were not back yet, so I came to this mountain path to wait for you. Weren't you still very far away when you sent me a message last time? How come you're back before me? She said in surprise and walked up to his side. Looking disappointed, she sat down on the stone steps of the mountain path and rested her chin on her hands. I thought I was the first to arrive. Mu Chen also sat down beside her and asked, Did your journey back go smoothly? Those people following you didn't make things difficult for you, did they? As he asked, he looked at her beggar outfit and asked curiously, Did you come back dressed as a beggar? I got rid of them. Brother, it turns out that pretending to be a beggar is really fun. Those people kept following me, but after I disguised myself as a beggar, they actually could not recognize me. She said with a smile, The next time I go out, I will dress as a beggar again. Big brother is not back yet. He was delayed by some matters on the way back, so he will probably be back 2 days later. However, he will be back within a month. Mu Chen looked at her and said, When I came back, I reported to Master's cave abode. Since you're here, you should go and tell him that you're back. Okay. You nodded her head, then standing up, she followed her brother towards the mountain. Arriving in front of the cave, you stood in front of the cave and shouted, Master, I have returned. They didn't hear any response. Just when they thought that their master wouldn't come out, they saw the cave's enchantment formation open, and their master slowly walked out from inside. He's back. Emperor Qing glanced at the two of them. When he felt the change in their auras, he nodded to himself. It seemed that they had gained something from this trip. Master, we have returned, but Big Brother arrived first. I arrived just a moment ago. You stepped forward and said, while looking at him with smiling eyes. Looking at his little disciple who was dressed like a beggar, the Qing Emperor rubbed his eyebrows and asked, How many days have you not bathed? Chapter 47-45. All right, quickly go back and take a bath. Emperor Qing waved his hand and motioned for the two to retreat. You two cultivate by yourselves these days. Wait for your eldest senior brother to return and then come see me together. Yes. The two of them replied. Then, they bowed and retreated. On the way back to their cave residence, Yu told her brother about the things she encountered outside these days, as well as how she hunted those crystal cores. Brother, what fun things did you encounter outside? Yu asked curiously. Hearing this, Mu Chen's expression froze. I met a madam. She looked very weak, but in fact, she was very powerful. Meeting her made me understand one thing. Yu blinked and asked curiously, what do you understand? Mu Chen looked at her and said seriously, you can't look at everything on the surface. Moreover, the weaker the woman, the more powerful she may be, and the more likely she is to deceive people. Deceive people? Yu was startled and smiled with a pair of beautiful eyes. Brother, Yu doesn't often deceive people. Yu only occasionally deceives bad people. Mu Chen smiled slightly and his little face softened a little. He reached out and rubbed her bird nest-like hair. Brother knows that Yu has always been very obedient and smart. Brother, I'll go back first to take a bath and change my clothes. I bought a lot of delicious food on my way back. Let's eat under the tree in a while. Yu said and waved at him and went back to her cave residence. On the other side, Hao's situation was unceasing. In a small town's alley, he saw a drug dealer selling some rare and unknown seeds on the ground. He squatted down to pick some and prepared to go back and give them to Yu. Unexpectedly, just as he was about to stand up after paying the bill, he was suddenly knocked down by a stick. He didn't even have time to react before he fainted. The moment before he fainted, his heart was filled with deep regret and self-blame. He was careless and thought that nothing would happen in such a place. But he didn't expect that because of his carelessness and relaxation, he would fall into danger. When he woke up, he was already locked in a small dark room. He couldn't see anything in the dark room, but he could hear the sound of chaotic breathing and suppressed sobbing. He tried his best to lean against the corner as he checked if the things on him were still there. When he discovered that his Qingquan bag had been taken away, but his space ring was still there, he calmed down a little. Most of his things, as long as they were valuable and useful things, were stored inside his interspatial ring. And his interspatial ring was not an ordinary interspatial ring. Among the three siblings, only Yu had an interspatial bracelet, while he and Mu Chenhe had an interspatial ring. Because after the upgrade, all three of their interspatial rings had a hidden function. As for the things in the Qingquan bag, other than some daily food and some gold coins, there was nothing valuable in it. He was not worried that they would take it away. However, where was this place? Who was it that captured him? What were they trying to do? These questions revolved in his mind one after another. Although he was anxious in his heart, he gradually calmed down as he had encountered many things in his life. Chapter 47-46. Woo woo, we don't know why we're here. I was knocked out as I was walking. When I woke up, we were already here. Woo woo woo. I want to go home, I want to go home. Woo woo. I want to go home too. I'm so scared. Mother, I'm so scared. Woo woo woo. Woo woo. When one child started crying, the other children started crying as well. In an instant, the originally dark little house became even more chaotic. Hao listened carefully and realized that there were not only boys crying, but also little girls crying. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be that we've encountered human traffickers? However, in the following period of time, he realized that he was wrong. As he did not dare to release his cultivation and startle those people, he could only wait. Unexpectedly, this wait lasted for a few days. The children locked in this little dark house were about 6 or 7 to 10 years old. There were about 30 of them. Ever since they were captured, they had not seen the light of day and had been in the dark. No one came to pay attention to them, and no one brought them food. There was not even a sip of water. At first, everyone would shout that they wanted to go home and call for their mothers. However, as a few days passed, they were so hungry that they had no strength. In a situation where they were thirsty and hungry, the children did not even want to move. Hao had been sitting in the corner. As he did not know if there were strong people watching them, he did not dare to act rashly. However, he secretly adjusted his breathing and also calculated the time when he was captured. After about 3 days, the door of the little dark house that had been closed finally opened from the outside. "Come out, it's time to eat," someone shouted outside. When the children heard this, they gritted their teeth and stood up. They supported themselves against the wall and walked out. When they arrived outside, they saw that it was an even larger prison cell. Small dark cells like theirs were arranged in a circle around it. Children walked out of each cell, but the expressions and situations of the children who walked out of the different small dark cells were somewhat different. Because the surrounding light was not very bright, but it was not dark either. It was not so dazzling for these people who were used to the darkness for a few days. Therefore, he saw that some of the children who walked out of the little dark houses had a ferocious and bloodthirsty aura. They were clearly young children, but each of them was like a small beast, guarding against people and constantly on guard. After they came out of the little dark house, they quickly rushed to a plate with a dozen steamed buns in front of them. They snatched the steamed buns to eat. For a moment, they were pushing, hitting, biting, and shouting. It was a mess. He could not help but be shocked. Because every little dark house was separated in this big prison cell. Just as he was in a daze, he saw that the dozen or so steamed buns in front of him had already been snatched up. Some were stuffing the buns into their mouths, some were still fighting over them, and some were crying and shouting, "Give me, give me, give me a bite." Chapter 47-47. At this moment, a man walked out from the middle area. He was holding a plate with a lid on it. He walked to the side of a pillar that was half the height of a person in the middle area. He placed the plate on the pillar and opened the lid, revealing the contents of the plate. A roasted chicken. A roasted chicken that was juicy and shiny, exuding a tempting aroma. This was a rare delicacy for these children who had been starving for days. It was food that made their eyes light up and they wanted to snatch it at all costs. It's still the same old rules. The winner can eat this roasted chicken. As the man spoke, he closed the lid under the glowing eyes of the surrounding children. After evoking their appetite and thoughts of snatching it, he did not even let them smell the fragrance of the roasted chicken. Ah! Just as that person's voice fell, several of the children in the area of the small black rooms suddenly started fighting. The sound of fists hitting the ground was accompanied by roars and screams. Chaos and noise resounded in the surrounding area. Some of the children in the cages shrank into a ball and retreated, watching with fear in their eyes. There were even a few cages where only one child stood at the front of the area. The children behind seemed to be afraid and did not dare to go forward. Hao-er pursed his lips and watched quietly. He watched as the children stomped and tore at each other, using all the methods they thought they could win in the battle. Finally, the metal door in front of each area opened. Only the winning child walked out of each room. Of course, they won in their area, but they still had to fight with the children in the other areas. "Let's begin," the man standing by the pillar said. As soon as he finished speaking, 7 or 8 children immediately fell into a chaotic battle. They did not use any special moves in their battles, only fighting methods that they had figured out on their own. However, there were 1 or 2 exceptions. In the end, a short boy who looked to be only 8 or 9 years old defeated the others. However, even though he won, he was covered in bruises and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. However, he walked forward step by step and stopped in front of the man. "The roasted chicken is mine." "Yes, it's yours." The man smiled, patted his head, and handed the roasted chicken to him. A little boy who was gasping for breath looked at the uncovered roast chicken and swallowed his saliva. Suddenly, he charged forward with the intention of snatching the roast chicken. However, at the moment he charged forward, a beam of sword energy instantly struck out and actually slashed him into 2. For a moment, cries of terror rang out along with the panicked voices of the children. Their voices were filled with fear and shock. However, the crowd's cries of terror only rang out for a moment before they quickly quieted down. This was because the children were all covering their mouths with their hands, afraid that they would cry out. They shrank back, but their eyes were filled with horror as they looked at the person on the ground who had been split in half. A moment ago, he was still alive, but in the next moment, he was dead. Moreover, he had died so miserably. How clenched his fists and the anger in his heart burned. He gritted his teeth, afraid that he would not be able to control himself and do something impulsive. Chapter 47-48. He didn't know how he finished reading all of it. He only knew that after a while, several masked cultivators in black walked out. They went to each area of the small dark room and selected a few children to take them away. Even the boy who ate the roasted chicken and the few who were defeated by the boy who ate the roasted chicken all left with them. How watched from the back as those people left with the children. He took a deep breath and glanced coldly in front of him. Just as he was about to follow the others back to the little dark room, he heard a voice. "You're right. Wait a minute." The man who was originally standing beside the pillar spoke. His gaze swept across the crowd and landed on How. He pointed and said, "You, come out." Everyone's gaze followed his finger and looked at How. In the dim light, he was an inconspicuous child. However, unlike others, he had a calmness that other children of his age didn't have. So sharp. How's heart sank. He knew that his leaking anger and gaze had attracted the man's attention. He suppressed his fluctuating emotions and walked to the front under everyone's gaze. A cultivator quickly rushed forward and opened the metal door of that area. Seeing this, How walked out and stepped in front of the man. The man put his hands behind his back and walked unhurriedly around How. He carefully sized him up. The more he looked, the more surprised he was. After glancing at the calm and expressionless child, he looked at the cultivator dressed in black and asked, "Did you just arrive?" "Yes, The cultivator replied respectfully. But who would have thought that as soon as he finished speaking, a wind blade would fly over and cut off one of his arms. His arm flew out and blood splattered all over the ground. That black-clothed man, after letting out an instinctive scream just now, quickly stopped his voice and trembled as he knelt down. "Do you know why I chopped off your arm?" The man said coldly with his hands behind his back. His bloodthirsty gaze landed on the cultivator in black kneeling on the ground. However, he was paying attention to How's expression from the corner of his eye. I don't know," he said with a trembling voice. He really didn't know what he had done wrong. "You don't know? If you don't know, I'll tell you," he said coldly. "Raise your head and look at this child. Is there any trace of panic or fear on him? Does he have the bearing of an ordinary child?" Hearing this, the cultivator in black looked up and happened to see the child looking at him coldly with a calm gaze. Seeing that his arm was chopped off, he didn't even frown. At this moment, his heart sank. He finally knew what mistake he had made. "Get out," the man said and didn't look at him. "Yes." The black-clothed man who had lost an arm endured the pain as he picked up his severed arm and staggered backwards. "Which family are you from?" He then turned and looked at How. How pursed his lips and didn't speak. Aren't you? Don't you want to go home? Tell me, and I can get someone to send you back." He chuckled and coaxed her. Chapter 47-49. Hearing this, the man narrowed his eyes and smiled. "You're really naughty. However, since you don't want to say it, it doesn't matter. I'll just kill you. No one will know what you've experienced and no one will know where you died." As soon as he finished speaking, he instantly attacked How, intending to kill him in one move. However, just as he was about to attack, How, who was already prepared, quickly dodged and opened up a distance. Seeing this, the man raised his eyebrows and revealed a look of surprise. "I didn't expect it. You've already reached the nascent soul stage. What a pity." He didn't say what a pity it was, but How knew that what he meant was that he was going to die in his hands. The people in the dark watched but didn't appear. It seemed that they didn't take the child seriously. Indeed, it was just a child. No one would take him seriously. No one would think that he could leave here alive. However, when they saw the child stretch out his hand and a long sword appeared in his hand, even the people in the dark were surprised. In the next moment, the spiritual power in his body surged and he waved his sword to attack the man. His spiritual power aura gathered on the blade, and a sharp sword aura instantly appeared on the blade. The whistling sound was accompanied by a murderous aura. When it rushed toward the man opposite him, the sharp sword turned and a cold light flashed. In an instant, even the people in the dark couldn't help but hold their breath. Whoosh! Whoosh! The man in front of him saw the sharp sword chi coming towards him. The sword in the little boy's hand was so fast that he could only see the shadow of the sword but not the blade. He couldn't help but be vigilant in his heart. He became more serious as he dealt with the attack and dodged at the same time. Unexpectedly, when the two swords collided, a sonorous sound accompanied by the sharp sound of the chi blade whistling through the air. Traces of coldness were like sharp blades that cut through his robes, cutting several holes in them. Clang! Whoosh! In the large space, two people, one big and one small, were fighting. The surrounding children were all stunned and did not make a single sound. They were all lying on the other side of the iron gate, watching the scene of the battle. In their eyes, they could only see the rays of cold light refracted and the two figures, one big and one small, flashing past. They were dazzled and shocked by the scene. That child looked 2 or 3 years older than some of them. Some were even about the same age as him, but he could fight with the people here. He was too powerful. Because of the commotion here, the people in black who had left came back. However, they didn't go forward. Instead, they stood not far from the middle and watched. Hiss! When the sound of a gasp was heard, the man's shoulder that had been cut by Hao-er's sword could not hide his shock. He covered his wound and retreated. A pair of bloodthirsty and fierce eyes glared at the little boy who had also suffered several wounds. Blood was seeping out and staining his clothes red. At this time, there were no less than 10 wounds on the little boy's body. Some were lighter and were external wounds, but there was also a wound that exposed his bones. However, the little boy pursed his lips and didn't make a sound. He didn't even make a sound and looked like he was going to fight to the death. Chapter 4750. Hao-er panted and gritted his teeth. He stared coldly at him. Suddenly, his spiritual energy aura surged again. His figure flashed and rushed forward at a strange speed. He swung a fatal blow at that person at a speed that was too fast for one's ears to react to. A powerful sword force whizzed up at that moment. The sword force instantly rose several meters. A visible sword force turned into a huge sharp blade and ruthlessly slashed at that person with murderous intent. Oh no! Be careful! Get out of the way! No one expected such a sudden scene. Even the few people who were watching the battle in the dark didn't expect that the young child would suddenly do such a thing. They were also shocked at that moment. They didn't even bother to hide their figures and instantly rushed out to save the man. However, they were relatively far away, and Hao-er's sword strike was so sudden and swift. Even if they wanted to save him, they wouldn't be able to save him in time when that sword strike was about to land. No. That man was also shocked at that moment. His eyes widened and were filled with horror. He retreated step by step. However, just as he turned around to escape, the powerful sword force with a terrifying pressure slashed down. His body stiffened at that moment. It was just a moment of stiffening. What awaited him was the outcome. Death. Ah! A shrill and miserable shriek resounded along with the terrifying sword chi. In the next moment, blood splashed out. That person's entire body had been chopped into 2 halves. His body scattered on the ground. It was a bloody scene, and everyone trembled in fear. Hiss! The surrounding people all sucked in a breath of cold air. They had just seen him kill a child. At this moment, he died at the hands of another child. Moreover, he died in the same way. It could only be said that this bloody scene, this similar scene, shocked their hearts and stung their eyes. "I'll kill you." Among the few people who rushed out, an old man's eyes were bloodshot. His murderous intent filled the sky. The anger in his heart and the two halves of the corpse on the ground stimulated his nerves. He rushed over and slammed his palm down at Hao-Er. That palm contained the powerful pressure and aura of a godly king expert. That palm contained monstrous murderous intent and anger. It was a determination to kill him. He used almost all of a godly king's strength in that palm strike. Even if he died, there would not be a complete corpse. He would be smashed into meat paste. Even though Hao-Er had been practicing swordsmanship with his master during this period of time, he could not dodge or block a godly king expert no matter how outstanding his talent was. Before he could even react, the old man's fatal strike had already landed on his chest with a bang. Bang! The tiny figure was blown away immediately. He had been knocked over a dozen meters away by the great force. However, the scene of flesh and blood did not happen. His organs did not shatter, nor did he put up a final struggle. As a matter of fact, there was not even a sliver of blood from the corner of his mouth. It was as if he had only been pushed away by someone, but it was not a big deal. He was not injured at all. Spurt. Chapter 47-51. Hiss. That's impossible. The few people who came out from the shadows and the surrounding black-clothed men all widened their eyes in shock and gasped. They looked at this scene in disbelief. Because this scene was too shocking, their hearts suddenly rumbled, as if their hearts had flipped over. Their bodies involuntarily trembled, and shock appeared in their eyes. Pfft! Cough cough. The dying old man twitched on the ground. His face was ghastly pale, and he rapidly aged and withered. He spat out another mouthful of blood and coughed painfully. As he coughed, blood continuously flowed out of his mouth, and his body twitched. No one stepped forward, because everyone knew that he would not survive. After a long silence, a deep and cold voice rang out from somewhere and reverberated in the air. An expert cast a defensive spell on him, so the power of that attack was reflected back as much as possible. However, after this attack, the defensive spell on him was destroyed as well. If we don't kill him now, when will we? At the same time, in Cloud Sky Mountain, the Qing Emperor, who was resting on a soft couch with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. A deep and cold voice rang out from his mouth as if he was talking to himself. Someone actually dares to attack my disciple? They must be tired of living. As soon as he said that, he slowly closed his eyes as if he had fallen asleep. On Hao-Er's side, he heard the voice reverberating in the air. He saw the God King experts surrounding him, but they stopped a few meters away from him. Then, they raised their hands. Some of them condensed a powerful airflow, some raised their swords, and some gathered flames in their hands. Powerful killing intent filled the air along with their pressure, causing the children in the small black hut to faint. I don't care where you're from. No matter who you are, you can't leave here alive today. Go to hell. As soon as the voice that was filled with killing intent fell, the attacks of several people simultaneously attacked him. In an instant, there was a whoosh. Air currents, flames, and sword auras attacked from 3 directions. They blasted towards Hao-Er with absolute speed and momentum. No matter what defensive spell he had, he would definitely not be able to escape from this fatal attack. Hao-Er felt the terrifying pressure and killing intent. Seeing that he could neither dodge nor withstand it, and that the aura of despair and death seemed to envelop him, he suddenly thought of his master's words. His master had said that even if he wasn't by their side, he would still be aware of everything that had happened to them while they were out training. His master said that if they encountered something or danger that they could not resolve, they could call him out for help. However, this also meant that he could once-a-year test. Therefore, at this moment, many thoughts flashed through his mind. In the end, he gritted his teeth and endured. At the same time, he stopped the silver wolf from coming out of the space. He was betting. He was betting that his master would appear. Whoosh. Boom. Ah. Chapter 47:52. A figure appeared in front of Hao, like a god. He had one hand behind his back and the other in front of his abdomen. A powerful airflow surged around him, and a terrifying pressure and aura pervaded the air. It was breathtaking. Master. Hao called out in surprise. His eyes were filled with joy. He knew it. He knew that his master would come to save him. At this moment, the god kings who had attacked Hao were all knocked to the ground by the powerful streams of air. They vomited blood as they paled as they stared at the expert who had suddenly appeared in shock. Who are you? The Lotus Supreme the Arch glanced at the few god kings coldly. He did not say anything. Instead, he raised his hand, and the few god kings on the ground were lifted up by a powerful air current. No, don't kill us, don't kill, ah. Before he could finish begging for mercy, he stretched out his hand and suddenly clenched it into a fist. Just as he clenched his hand into a fist, a few cracking sounds could be heard. The cultivators' heads tilted to the side and they instantly stopped breathing. Pfft. Some distance away, the cultivators in black had their veins broken by the powerful aura. They spat out blood and fell to the ground one by one. After killing those people, the Lotus Supreme the Arch raised his eyebrows and said in a low and cold voice, "Trying to run? Come out." He waved his sleeves, and a figure was pulled out of nowhere and fell heavily in front of him. Lotus Supreme the Arch. The middle-aged man who was pulled out and fell to the ground was pale. His eyes were filled with shock. He hurriedly got up from the ground and knelt in front of the Lotus Supreme the Arch. Lotus Supreme the Arch, please spare my life. You know me? The Lotus Supreme the Arch narrowed his eyes and glanced at the person in front of him. He had no impression of him at all. Lotus Supreme the Arch, I am a subordinate of the Northern Flame Great Emperor. I was fortunate enough to see your face many years ago. He calmed himself down and thought that even the Lotus Supreme the Arch would give him some face and spare his life if he mentioned the Northern Flame Great Emperor's name, right? However, just as he finished speaking, he heard an indifferent and emotionless voice ring out. Oh. So they were from Northern Flame? All the more reason to kill him. The moment Emperor Qing said that, he waved his sleeves. The person who was kneeling in front of him seemed to be suddenly pressed down by a huge mountain. With a bang, his upper body fell forward in a kneeling position. Even his head was knocked out. Blood splattered all over the ground. The head rolled one round and finally landed in a corner. This scene happened almost instantaneously. It was so fast that even Hao, who was standing behind Emperor Qing, couldn't react in time. He couldn't help but be startled when he saw that person's head being chopped off. What are you waiting for? The Lotus Emperor turned around and looked at Hao. Master, can you save them all? Hao looked at the children who had all fainted under the pressure. You can't even take care of yourself, and you still have the time to care about others? The Azure the Arch glanced at Yi Futian and said, I did not come here with my true body. I only sent a clone. If you want to save someone, do it yourself. Hao immediately asked, Master, have you killed all the cultivators here? Chapter 47:53. As he spoke, Hao took out a strip of cloth and medicine to stop the bleeding. He simply and quickly bandaged the deepest wound on his body. Then, he respectfully bowed to the Qing Emperor. Disciple thanks Master for saving me. Let's go. Master will protect you for a while longer. The Qing Emperor said. He originally intended to let Hao deal with it himself, but after seeing the deep wound, he changed his mind and stepped forward. How saw this and a rare smile appeared on his face. He answered loudly, yes, and quickly followed. He didn't know why his master changed his mind. He only knew that his master, who originally wanted him to deal with it himself, took him outside for a walk. He didn't even need to do anything. He took care of all the black-robed cultivators outside by himself. Return to the mountain as soon as you're done. You're the only one left. The Qing emperor said and glanced at Hao. Yes, disciple understands. Hao answered respectfully. Tidy yourself up when you go back so that the two little ones won't be worried. The Qing emperor said lightly. Okay. Hao nodded. A warm current flowed through his heart. Just as he finished speaking, his master, who was originally standing in front of him, disappeared. When he thought about how his master said that this was not his real body but a clone, he secretly made up his mind. He had to work hard to cultivate. In the future, even his clone must be as powerful as his master. At that moment, he quickly gathered his thoughts and quickly began to deal with the matters here, in Cloud Sky Mountain. In the cave abode, the Qing emperor, who was lying on the soft couch, slowly opened his eyes. He stood up, flicked his robes, and got up to walk outside. After leaving the cave abode, he slowly walked to the stone table under the tree and sat down. He took out wine and wine cups from the space and drank there, enjoying the tranquility and seclusion of this moment. However, after a while, he heard a sweet and happy voice. Master, master. Yu bounced over and quickly walked to him. She took out something from the space as if she was presenting a treasure. Master, master, look. This is the gift I brought back for you when I came back. The Qing emperor looked at her and saw her open the small box in her hand. She took out a shiny black jade hairpin and handed it to him. Master, master, do you think it's pretty? This is what I bought after selling some valuable things of ferocious beasts. Yu said with a beaming smile, then handed over that hairpin to him. The three of them had been here with her master for a year. Her master treated them very well and took care of them. So this time, she earned some extra money and wanted to buy a gift for her master. The Lotus Emperor's eyes lit up when he saw the hairpin. He knew everything that the three of them had gone through when they were training outside. Naturally, he also knew that this little girl had collected the skin, horns, or some inner cores of fierce beasts and sold them. After getting a considerable amount of money, she went to the Babeo house to choose something and finally chose this hairpin. He originally thought that this was a gift for her father, but he didn't expect that it was for him. Thinking of this, his eyes softened. It was unknown what he had thought of, but he picked up the black jade hairpin and said, Master will accept this gift. Chapter 47-54. Emperor Qing glanced at her and smiled. He said gently, You're very beautiful. I like you very much. That's great, I knew you would like it. She clapped her hands and cheered happily. Without waiting for him to speak, she turned and ran back to where she came from, shouting, Master, I'm going to play with my brother. We're going to the foot of the mountain to wait for him to come back. Seeing that the little girl had run far away, Emperor Qing retracted his gaze and looked at the black jade hairpin in his hand. He then took out the white jade hairpin in his hair. Looking at the two hairpins, one black and one white, he shook his head and revealed a doting smile. His low voice sounded as if he was whispering softly. This girl, her gifts are all the same. Thinking that his disciple who had gone through a tribulation had returned to his side and was growing up by his side in the same way, he felt incomparably gratified. This time, no matter what, he would protect her well and would never let her suffer the slightest bit of harm, let alone let her suffer the pain of reincarnation. At the foot of the mountain, Mu Chen and Mu Yu were sitting on the steps. Mu Yu was humming a little tune as she looked at the winding mountain path. Brother, shouldn't we send a message to ask where Big Brother is? Why isn't he back yet? I already asked when you went to find Master just now. He said he was delayed by something, but he's already rushing back here. He shouldn't be able to reach here today. It'll take at least 2 or 3 days. Mu Chen said as he played with a branch in his hand. Sister, did Master like the gift you gave him? Yes, Master said the hairpin is very beautiful and he likes it very much. Yu said with a smile. Thinking that her master liked her gift, she was very happy. Why did you think of giving him a hairpin? Mu Chen asked. Because Master has everything. I don't know what to give him. If it's medicinal pills, they'll be gone after eating them. As for other treasures, Master must have more than us. I also saw that Master only has that white jade hairpin on his head, and he hasn't changed it after wearing it for so long, so I thought, does Master not have a hairpin? Thinking that he has a white jade hairpin, I bought him a black jade hairpin. As she spoke, her small face overflowed with a happy smile. She said, in the future, Master will have 2 hairpins and can use them alternately. The brother and sister chatted here until the sky darkened. Only then did they walk towards the immortal's cave. A few days later, Hao-Er finally arrived at the foot of the mountain. Due to his injuries, his journey was slowed down. However, he managed to rush back within a month. When he arrived at the foot of the mountain, he saw that his younger siblings were already waiting for him. Big brother! Big brother! The 2 of them shouted and quickly walked to his side. However, once they got closer, the 2 of them also noticed that he seemed to have become much more haggard, and his face was somewhat pale. Big brother, are you okay? Why does he look so pale? Are you too tired? Yu-Er asked, then coming to the front of him, she sized him up. After carefully sizing him up, worry appeared on her little face. Big brother, are you injured? Was it a serious injury? I can smell blood on your body. Where are you hurt? Have you applied the medicine? Yu-Er nervously asked. Brother, here you go. Mu Chen was even more direct. He took out a nourishing pill from his space and handed it to him. Chapter 4755. I'm fine. You don't have to worry about me. It's just a small injury, and I've already applied medicine with mother's medicine. The wound healed quickly. Maybe I'm just a little tired from rushing back, but it's not a big deal. Hao-Er comforted them while saying to Mu Chen, put away the medicinal pills. Big brother has some in his space, and we ate them on the way. Mu Chen paused for a moment. Thinking that his mother had prepared a lot of medicinal pills for the 3 of them, he put away the medicinal pills. Big brother, come here and take a rest first. Yu-Er took his hand and sat down on the stone steps. She took out some water and said, Big brother, drink some water. Okay. Hao-Er didn't refuse her kindness. He took a few sips from her hand and felt the dryness in his throat ease a little. Then he asked, how long have you been waiting here? We've been waiting here since morning, but we didn't slack off. Big brother and I were reciting the mental cultivation method here just now. Yu said with a smile. You didn't encounter any danger on your way back, right? He didn't ask in detail on the communication jade. Now that he saw them, he asked. There was no danger. It was something that we could deal with. We weren't injured. Yu said. Well, it was just a small matter. Mu Chen also said. He looked at him and asked, Big brother, did you meet a very strong person? It's a long story. I'll tell you in detail after we meet Master. After resting for a while, he stood up and said, let's go and pay respects to Master first. Okay, Master has already said that we should go together when you're back. Yu said and stood up with him. The 3 of them went up the mountain together. When they arrived in front of their master's cave residence, Hao shouted, Master, disciple is back. Master, we're here too. Yu-Er also raised her voice. Come in. Qing Emperor's voice came from the cave residence. When the 3 people outside heard this, they looked at each other and walked in. When they came in, they saw their master sitting at the stone table and drinking tea. There was something like an invitation beside his hand. Greetings, Master." The three of them respectfully saluted. "Yes." He glanced at the three of them and said, "You all did very well in the test this time. You all completed the task within a month, although there were some accidents in between." As he spoke, his gaze landed on Hao. He asked, "Have your injuries healed?" "Master, I've recovered from all my minor injuries. There's only one wound that's a little deeper and hasn't fully recovered, but it's not a big deal," Hao said respectfully. At the same time, he took out a Qianquan bag from his space and said, "Master, this is the crystal core that I obtained from hunting. Keep it for yourselves. Even if you give them to me, I have no use for them. What's more, they're all yours," Emperor Qing said unhurriedly. He looked at the three of them and said slowly, "Seeing that you have done well this time, I will take you to a banquet in 3 days to let you see the world. In these 3 days, those who need to recuperate should recuperate and those who need to cultivate should cultivate. We will set off in 3 days." Chapter 47-56. Emperor Qing nodded, and his expression softened a little. Then, he took out 3 immortal fruits from the space. "This is a reward for the 3 of you. Take it back and eat it. It can increase your spiritual power by 100 years. "Thank you, Master." "Thank you, Master," the 3 of them said in unison. They happily went forward to receive the fruits, bowed, and then left. At the same time, in the East Sea Spirit region where Xianyuan Mo's cultivated his soul, Gu Mo, who was guarding this place, was patrolling the sea with his men. Ever since their master had left to travel, the leaders of the 8 Phoenix Guards had been taking turns to guard this place. It was also because there would be strange movements here every once in a while. Therefore, even with them guarding this place, they could not suppress the curiosity and adventurous thoughts of those people. They knew that the Yama Lord existed in this sea, so they came to guard this place. However, in the eyes of others, they thought that there was some great fortune and treasure here. Even if there was a risk of being discovered and killed, there would always be people who would take the risk to explore. "Captain, we caught 3 rogue cultivators who intended to sneak into the sea," a Phoenix Guard reported. Gu Mo, who was patrolling the sea with his men, frowned and said, "Bring them to the sand by the sea." As soon as he finished speaking, he led his men back. At this time, it was almost noon. Although there were clear orders not to approach the East Sea Spirit region, there were still many cultivators wandering around. Therefore, when they saw the Phoenix Guard catch 3 rogue cultivators and bring them to the sand by the sea, the eyes of those cultivators who were watching from afar flashed. "Let me go, let me go. What right do you have to catch me?" A cultivator struggled, wanting to break free. However, the ones who were holding him were strictly trained Phoenix Guards, so naturally, they would not let him break free so easily. "We didn't do anything. What do you want to do? Let us go," another person also shouted. Even if he forced himself to be calm, there was still fear in his eyes. "The East Sea Spirit region is not your territory. So what if we sneak in? Let us go." Another person also shouted, but no one answered him. The Phoenix Guard took them to the sand by the sea. He kicked the back of their knees and coldly shouted, "Kneel." As soon as he said that, he pressed down with his hand. "Ah!" The 3 of them were caught off guard by the kick. They cried out in alarm and instinctively knelt down. "Captain." When the Phoenix Guards saw Gu Mo return, they immediately called out respectfully. Their sonorous and powerful voices could even be heard by the cultivators in the distance. The 3 of them raised their heads and looked at the person in front of them. He was dressed in a low-key purple robe and had a jade belt around his waist. There was a token of the captain of the Phoenix Guards on his waist. Looking up, he had an outstanding appearance and a cold expression. He had the aura of a leader. This was one of the 8 captains of the Phoenix Guard under Ghost Dr. Fengjiu. The hearts of the 3 people stagnated, and their breathing became chaotic. Their bodies trembled slightly due to panic and fear. Cultivators are not allowed to approach the Eastern Sea Spirit region. Don't you know that? Gumo's cold voice rang out. We didn't do anything. One of them said in a trembling voice. Don't kill us. We really didn't do anything. We just wanted to go to the bottom of the sea to see if there was any immortal mansion. Chapter 47:57. He had his hands behind his back, and his voice was indifferent but low. Although his voice, which contained spirit energy, was not loud, it spread clearly and fell into the ears of the cultivators in the distance. We, the Phoenix Guards, are guarding this place under the orders of our master. Anyone who crosses the line drawn by the Phoenix Guards will be regarded as an enemy of our master. We have never been merciful to our enemies. He glanced at the 3 cultivators kneeling on the ground and instructed the Phoenix Guards at the side, cripple their cultivations and expel them from the line. Let them fend for themselves. If anyone crosses the line and wants to enter the Spirit East Sea, kill them on the spot once you catch them. Yes. The Phoenix Guards responded respectfully. After crippling the 3 cultivators' cultivations, they threw them out of the line. With their cultivations crippled, shrill screams rang out, causing the cultivators in the distance to feel a chill in their hearts. As cultivators, if their cultivations were crippled, they would not be able to live for long. After all, people who had cultivated to that stage were already of a certain age. Once they lost their cultivation, they naturally had no way to live. What do you think is at the bottom of the East Sea? Is it worth them guarding it so strictly? They don't have any secret treasures in the sea, but they don't allow anyone to enter. The more they do this, the more it arouses the desire to investigate. However, you've all seen the outcome of being caught. Almost no one is lucky enough to escape. Do you really want to know what's in the sea? The cultivators discussed in low voices. However, no matter how curious they were, they could not know what the Phoenix Guards were guarding. At this moment, a few rays of light descended from the sky and landed in front of Gumo on the sand by the sea. Gumo looked at the few people in front of him. They were 3 old men, a woman, and a middle-aged man in a luxurious robe. They were all very powerful. However, the 3 old men and the woman were standing behind the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man in the luxurious robe seemed to be their master. Are you Gumo, one of the 8 great Phoenix Guards? The middle-aged man in the luxurious robe smiled. His gaze fell on Gumo and sized him up before he nodded. As expected, the ghost doctor has no weak subordinates. I didn't expect you to have such a cultivation at such a young age. Who are you? Why have you come here? Gumo asked, his gaze landing on the other party. The middle-aged man waved his sleeves and a soundproof barrier appeared around them. Then, he said, I am the sovereign of the Southern Territory. I am here to inquire about something. His gaze moved away from Gumo and landed on the Eastern Sea. He asked, are you guys guarding here because the Azure Dragon Sovereign is in the Eastern Sea? Hearing that, Gumo's eyes flashed slightly. He glanced at him. He knew that the Yama Lord had gone through a tribulation and gone missing. The world that the Yama Lord controlled was in great turmoil as well. Others might not know, but the lords of the heavens and earth would more or less know. Coupled with the strange happenings in the Eastern Sea during this period of time, and the fact that they were ordered to guard this place, it wasn't difficult for them to guess. Therefore, he didn't hide anything and said, that's right. The Yama Lord is in this spirit realm, so my lord ordered us to guard this place. Master had also instructed that if any lords of the heavens and earth asked about this matter, they were to tell the truth. This was because she did not want those lords of the heavens and earth to disturb the nourishment of the Yama Lord out of curiosity. Chapter 47:58. I see. Thank you for telling me. He nodded slightly and smiled. Actually, I'm not the only one who came to ask today. The other sovereigns are also very curious. That's why I made this trip. I hope you don't misunderstand. Hearing this, Gumo's expression was indifferent. She said, "My master has already made it clear that if the sovereigns of the various realms come to ask, we are to tell them the truth. Firstly, we want you to know why we are guarding this place. Secondly, we hope that the sovereigns of the various realms will not disturb the Yama Lord's quiet recuperation. Also, this matter can be passed down to the sovereigns of the various realms. However, my master has also made it clear that if anyone dares to disturb the Yama Lord's quiet recuperation after knowing the reason, she will not let them off." The South Qing sovereign's eyes flashed and his heart skipped a beat. What she meant was that she wanted them to know about this matter. However, if anyone were to disturb the Azure Dragon sovereign's quiet recuperation in the sea, she would not be courteous to them. Thinking of the ghost Dr. Fengjiu's methods, the South Qing sovereign smiled and said, "I understand. When I return, I will definitely pass on the ghost doctor's words to the other sovereigns. I won't disturb your patrol any longer. See you again." He cupped his hands and looked deeply at Guo. Then, he waved his hand to remove the soundproof boundary and left with the others. After watching them leave, Guo ordered the Phoenix Guards to patrol the surroundings and changed a team to patrol the sea. He then took out his communication jade and informed his master, who was traveling, about the matter that the South Qing monarch had come here to inquire about. On the other side, Fengjiu had been wandering around alone. Recently, she came to Heaven Mountain again. The last time she came here, she could not enter because of the boundary. This time, she entered the boundary alone. She did not go to the cave abode where Mo Chen was cultivating his immortal body. Instead, she went to the snowy peak at the top of the sky where Tian Jizi often sat. She sat there cross-legged with her eyes closed. No one knew how long she had been sitting there. Her red robes were covered with a layer of snow as thick as a palm. Her original red robes were covered with white snow. Even her black hair was dyed white by the snow. She sat there motionlessly, as if she had become one with the world. If one did not look carefully, one would not be able to tell that the person sitting there was alive. At the peak of the snowy mountain, it was quiet. Only the sound of snowflakes and the whistling of the cold wind could be heard. After an unknown period of time, she slowly opened her eyes. At this moment, a layer of snowflakes had gathered on her eyelashes. As she opened her eyes and looked up, her eyelashes gently fluttered and the snowflakes fell with her. Looking at the vast expanse of whiteness in front of her, she opened her mouth slightly and gently exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. In an instant, she felt refreshed all over, as if a pure aura flowed through her body as she exhaled the turbid air. It was very comfortable. She sat there without moving, only adjusting the spiritual energy in her body. Following the circulation of the qi in her body, the snow on her body also scattered and fell. At that moment, the dazzling red robe on her body was even more dazzling in this vast expanse of white snow. She took out her communication jade from her space. When she heard Gumo's words, she held her communication jade and looked ahead with an unfathomable expression. Chapter 47-59. Arriving in front of the cave, she stopped in her tracks. Looking at the entrance of the cave, which was covered with a barrier, her eyes flashed. Tian Jizi had died because of Mo Zhe, and Mo Chen had died because of her. Now that it was difficult for him to condense his immortal body, no matter what, she had to help him condense his immortal body so that he could ascend to immortality and enjoy eternal life. Although she had not yet ascended to immortality, she now had enough power. She believed that she could help him. Lifting her hand, she gently waved it, and the barrier in front of her broke. She stepped into the cave and walked forward step by step until she saw the golden lotus, which was sealed in ice. On top of a block of ice in the cave, there was a golden lotus which was emitting a faint light. Because it was sealed in ice, the aura of the golden lotus did not spread. However, standing there, Fengjiu could clearly feel the familiar aura emitting from the golden lotus. Golden lotus incarnation, condense and ascend. Mo Chen, you've done so much for me. It's time for me to do something for you. She murmured softly, then slowly raised her hand and placed it on the ice. A pure spiritual aura, accompanied by the rich ancient green lotus aura, slowly seeped into the ice and headed towards the golden lotus in the ice. A green light gradually rose from Fengjiu's body and surrounded her. The green lotus aura and pure spiritual energy were injected into the golden lotus in the ice. The golden lotus, which was originally emitting a gentle light, gradually grew stronger and the half-closed lotus flower gradually opened. As time passed, Fengjiu continued to stand there, controlling the green lotus aura and pure spiritual energy in her body to transfer to the golden lotus. Until, 2 days later. Ka-cha. The sound of ice cracking could be heard in the cave. A small crack appeared on the ice, slowly extending and expanding. Crack. Another cracking sound rang out, and more cracks appeared on the ice. Gradually, it covered the ice that was half the height of a person. In the next moment, another cracking sound came from the ice. This time, it shattered, and the ice scattered all over the ground. It turned into countless pieces that landed on the ice stone, then turned into water and disappeared without a trace. At the same time, the entire cave was covered by a dazzling golden light. A gentle aura spread out along with the golden light. Fengjiu felt that the light from the golden lotus was too dazzling and slightly averted his eyes. However, in the next moment, he felt a fluctuation in the air and a familiar aura spread out. She turned around abruptly and saw that the light from the golden lotus had dissipated. Even the golden lotus had disappeared without a trace. However, what appeared next was that familiar person, Mo Chen. He was still dressed in elegant, snow-white robes and his ink-black hair draped over his shoulders. He looked natural and beautiful. His body emitted a faint layer of golden holy light. His entire body was shrouded in the golden light, and he looked holy and otherworldly. What was different from before was that this time, his body was no longer illusory, but an immortal body formed by the golden lotus. Chapter 4760. Jiu. Mo Chen's gentle voice rang out. A faint smile appeared on his celestial face. His deep and calm gaze landed on Fengjiu, who was dressed in red. Mo Chen, Fengjiu looked at him and also smiled. Today, I will help you ascend. Congratulations on attaining the blue lotus. Mo Chen said gently. He looked at her and said, now that my immortal body has been formed, you don't need to help me anymore. Once I finish the heavenly lightning tribulation, I can ascend and become an immortal. 81 bolts of heavenly lightning. This is no small matter, Fengjiu said. Hearing this, Mo Chen shook his head slightly. There was a gentle smile on his lips. I am an immortal body formed by the golden lotus. The heavenly lightning tribulation will only strengthen my immortal body. It won't be a problem. Fengjiu was slightly surprised. 81 bolts of heavenly lightning tribulation will only strengthen your immortal body? Yes, you forgot that I am not an ordinary cultivator. My physical body has long dissipated. Now that I have condensed an immortal body, the heavenly lightning tribulation won't do me any harm. On the contrary, it will only benefit me. As if he had sensed the changes in the sky, he looked at her and said, the heavenly lightning tribulation is gathering and the weather is changing. Joe, I have to go. With that, he slowly walked out. His steps looked like he was walking on the ground. However, if one looked closely, they would see that he was walking on the wind. He did not touch the ground. Fengjiu saw him leave the cave and quickly followed him. As soon as they left the cave, they felt the terrifying qi in the sky gathering at the peak of Sky Mountain. The wind and clouds surged, and the muffled sound of thunder came from the clouds. This scene was very similar to when Immerse had broken through. Fengjiu's heart skipped a beat. However, when she thought of Mo Chen's words, she could not help but look at him. Mo Chen's expression was calm. He walked slowly to the peak of the mountain and stopped. He turned to look at her. Jiu, today I'm ascending. In the future, we can only meet again in the immortal world. I hope you can safely pass through the tribulation. Everything will be fine. He spoke slowly and looked at her deeply with a calm and serene gaze. Then, he retracted his gaze and turned around to sit cross-legged in the snow. His hands formed the shape of a lotus and placed between his knees. I will. Let's meet again in the immortal world. Fengjiu said softly. He stepped back a little and prepared to guard him here and watch him ascend safely. Boom! In the sky, a loud rumble of thunder resounded through the clouds. The wind and clouds surged, and the sound of heavenly thunder alarmed all realms. Boom! As a bolt of lightning streaked across the sky, the first bolt of lightning struck down with a rumble. The two bolts of lightning intersected and landed on Mo Chen's body, creating a powerful shockwave. She was worried, but when she saw that Mo Chen was still sitting there quietly after the bolt of lightning struck, she finally relaxed. It looked like what he said was true. When he ascended and became an immortal, the heavenly thunder would only strengthen his immortal body. It would not harm him and would instead benefit him. She was relieved. At the same time, the sovereigns of all realms were alarmed by the sound of heavenly thunder. A few of them were talking about the East Sea spiritual region. When they heard the sound of heavenly thunder, they immediately stepped out of the main hall and went outside. Is that the sound of heavenly thunder, the sound of ascension? One of them was extremely shocked. Could it be that the ghost Dr. Fengjiu has ascended? Another person also looked at the sky in shock. Chapter 4761. Hearing this, they looked at each other and immediately said, "Let's go." With that, they waved their sleeves and instantly turned into several streaks of light and flew up into the sky. At the same time, in the upper immortal realm, when the four great emperors noticed the strange movement below, their expressions turned extremely ugly. Could it be that the ghost Dr. Fengjiu has ascended? They all guessed at the same time. In their opinion, the only one who could ascend was the ghost Dr. Fengjiu. Other than her, no one else dared to try. Even if they wanted to try, the opportunity was hard to find. Immediately, they arrived in front of their respective water mirror. With a wave of their sleeves, they saw the person in the water mirror who was undergoing heavenly lightning and ascending. Who is this person? They were unfamiliar with Mo Chen, so they couldn't guess who he was. However, when they saw that the person's eyes were tightly shut, his appearance was outstanding, and his temperament was refined, they couldn't help but secretly praise him. I didn't expect that in the lower immortal realm, apart from Xianyuan Mo's and the ghost Dr. Fengjiu, there would be such a banished immortal. How surprising. This person is already an immortal? One of the great emperors took a closer look and was very surprised to see that the person below who was undergoing heavenly lightning already had an immortal body. Since it's an immortal body, ascension is also in accordance with the heavenly Tao. It seems that another great emperor will be born in the upper immortal realm. Perhaps because they saw that the person below was already an immortal body, they didn't make things difficult for him. This was because they knew that once an immortal body was formed, ascension was only in accordance with the heavenly Tao. If they tried to stop him, the heavenly Tao would probably not tolerate them. Therefore, they waved their sleeves and turned to leave the water mirror. When they arrived outside, they sent a message to the other great emperors and prepared to discuss whether they could rope this person in after he ascended. He would be a great help in the future. However, because Fengjiu had retreated further away to protect Mo Chen, the four great emperors only saw that Mo Chen was undergoing heavenly lightning and didn't notice the red-robed Fengjiu further away. On the other side, Emperor Qing, who had brought Hao, Mu Chen, and Mu Yu to attend the banquet, also sensed the abnormality in the lower realm. Thus, he flicked his sleeve and an image appeared in front of him. It's Uncle Mo Chen. When Hao saw the person enduring the heavenly lightning, he couldn't help but exclaim softly and quickly went to his master's side. I want to see it too. I want to see it too. Yu also quickly stepped forward, and blinking her pair of big eyes, she looked at that person who was sitting quietly with his eyes closed. It really is Uncle Mo Chen. Is he advancing? Mu Chen asked in surprise. The Azure-the-Arch glanced at his three disciples and said slowly, he is preparing to ascend. After experiencing 81 bolts of heavenly lightning, he can ascend and become an immortal. He will be ranked as the 9 heavens supreme the arch and live as long as heaven and earth. Is he as powerful as Master? Curiously raised her head and looked at him. Yes, but even if we are both 9 heavens supreme thearchs, there are differences in strength. I have cultivated for tens of thousands of years and cannot be compared to just anyone. He said slowly, his voice neither fast nor slow, and there was a hint of arrogance in his words. Master, will Uncle Chen be in danger when he ascends? Hao couldn't help but ask worriedly. This was because he remembered that their father had encountered heavenly lightning during his ascension. Chapter 4762. Hearing this, the 3 of them looked at each other and smiled happily at the same time. It's good that there's no danger. Maybe Uncle Chen has ascended and we'll have a chance to see him in the future. Mother? It's Mother is there. Looked at the corner of the screen in surprise. There was a red figure. That figure was far away, but they knew that it was their mother. Hearing Yu's words, Hao and Mu Chen's minds suddenly shook, and with anxiousness in their eyes, they promptly searched that picture. Sure enough, at the most corner, they saw a tiny red figure in that snowy ground. It's really Mother. Hao and Mu Chen were happy. They hadn't seen their mother for more than a year. Master, I want to see Mother. We want Mother. Pulled on Emperor Qing's sleeve and looked at him with hope. Emperor Qing looked at the 3 children and waved his hand to show the main view of the red figure Fengjiu. Mother, missed you so much. Shouted at the screen. She knew that her mother didn't see her and couldn't hear her, but she still called her. Mother, we missed you too. Hao and Mu Chen said. Their throats were choked and tears were in their eyes. They missed their mother. They missed their mother so much. When could they see their mother again? How could they be together with their father and mother? Seeing that his 3 disciples were about to cry, Emperor Qing waved his sleeve and the screen disappeared. He turned and walked to the front of the ship with his hands behind his back. Cultivate well. In the future, when your strength increases and you have the ability to protect yourself, when your mother ascends to the 9 heavens, you'll have plenty of opportunities to see her. Hearing this, the 3 of them looked at each other and wiped away their tears. They nodded heavily. Yes, Master, we'll cultivate hard. We'll become very powerful in the future. Seeing this, Emperor Qing nodded and said, Go and rest. There are still 2 days to go. You have to recuperate your mental state and don't embarrass me when the time comes. Yes. The 3 of them replied before returning to their cabins to rest. On the other side, the South City Sovereign and the rest were surprised when they arrived at the area where Chen was advancing. They thought that the one ascending here would be the ghost Dr. Fengjiu, but they didn't expect it to be Nalan Chen. So it's him who's ascending. However, didn't he disappear from the world long ago? How could this be? One of the sovereigns stared in astonishment at Chen, who was being tempered by the heavenly lightning. Yes. In that battle back then, many cultivators saw him die protecting the ghost Dr. Fengjiu. At that time, I saw him disappear from the sky with my own eyes. Not even his corpse was left behind. I didn't expect him to still be alive, and now he's in the ascension stage. It's really unbelievable. Look at his body. It seems a little different. Also, there's a golden lotus between his eyebrows. Could that be an ancient golden lotus? One of the sovereigns said as he stared in astonishment at the golden lotus between Chen's eyebrows. The South City Sovereign pondered and said, I wonder what kind of fortuitous encounter he had. He could be reborn and even ascend to become an immortal. Chapter 4763. Back then, the Azure Dragon Sovereign couldn't withstand the 81 bolts of lightning and died. Is this Nalan Chen more powerful than the Azure Dragon Sovereign? Can he survive this tribulation and ascend directly? No, look at the immortal chi surrounding him. It seems like he already has an immortal body. Ascending to the 9 heavens is in accordance with the heavenly Tao. He should be different from the Azure Dragon Sovereign. Hearing this, the few of them were stunned. Upon closer inspection, they could see that the immortal chi surrounding this person was indeed different. They didn't get too close, afraid that the lightning would strike them by mistake and cause them to suffer for no reason. Because they were quite far away, they didn't plan to greet Fengjiu after they found out the reason. Instead, they looked at each other and left first. Fengjiu, who was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, opened his eyes and looked in the direction where the sovereigns left. He looked at Imochen in front of him and then closed his eyes to continue cultivating. With her guarding this place, ordinary people wouldn't dare to casually attack Imochen. She could also use the immortal chi around her to cultivate, which was extremely beneficial to her. It was different from the 3 bolts of heavenly lightning a day that Mo-Zhe struck when he was advancing. Perhaps it was because Imochen had already formed his celestial body, but the bolts of heavenly lightning that struck his body would strike again after the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn. It could be said that there was no pause. She could feel it from where she was. It was just as Imochen had said. These bolts of lightning could only make his celestial body stronger. After each bolt of lightning fell, the celestial chi in his body would overflow again and again. Not to mention the surrounding celestial chi, even the celestial chi around him was very thick. She believed that in a few days, he would be able to ascend to the 9 heavens. 2 days later, in the immortal realm, on the flying ship, the Lotus Emperor called out his 3 disciples. Master! Master! The 3 of them called out to him and looked at him, waiting for him to speak. The Lotus Emperor looked at the 3 of them and said, Master has refined 3 illusory weapons for you. They can change your appearance. After wearing the illusory weapons, even if someone stronger sees you, they won't be able to see your original appearance. As he spoke, he flipped his hand, and 3 simple rings appeared in his palm. Hearing his words, the 3 of them looked at the 3 rings curiously. After picking up the 3 rings, Yu asked curiously, Master, you refined these? When did you refine them? You can also refine illusory weapons? Then why did you give them to us now? Hearing this, Emperor Qing glanced at her, leaned back, and said unhurriedly, This illusory device is not an ordinary item, and it takes a lot of time to refine. It took me nearly a year to refine it. After you drip your blood on it, it will change your appearance according to your original appearance. Don't take it off after you put it on. Yes, thank you, Master. As Hao and Mu Chen spoke, they bit their fingers and dripped a drop of blood to claim ownership. Then, they put the rings on their fingers. The originally loose rings shrunk to the size of their fingers after putting them on. Then, the rings on their fingers became invisible, as if they weren't wearing any illusion rings. It's gone. Chapter 4764. Sister, your appearance has changed. Mu Chen looked at her little face, his eyes flashing slightly. She was obviously still the same person, but her appearance had changed slightly. It was not that she had completely changed into a stranger's appearance, but she had become somewhat similar to her original appearance. Brother, your appearance has also changed. Yu looked at her brother and asked with a smile, Brother, are we still the same now? Hao carefully looked at their appearance and shook his head, No, but there are some similarities. But I can see that you are 2 different people. Brother, look at your appearance. Yu took out a mirror from her space and pointed it at him, Brother, you also look very good like this. Hao looked at his appearance in the mirror and saw that it was very different from his original appearance. It was only somewhat similar to his original appearance, but in fact, it was not as good looking as his original appearance. This is very good. In this way, even if outsiders saw their appearance, they would never think that their parents were Xianyuan Mo's and Fengjiu. Qing Emperor looked at the 3 of them and slowly said, This illusion ring will change your appearance as you grow up. Wear it today and do not take it off. In the future, when you have the strength to protect yourself, you can take it off if you want to. Yes, thank you, Master. The three of them responded and bowed to express their gratitude. Another day passed. Hao, Mu Chen, and Yu, were standing at the bow of the ship by their master's side. They were looking at him as he pointed ahead and told them what kind of place this was. Suddenly, they heard an extremely loud heavenly thunder falling down. In the distant sky, a seven-colored rainbow streaked across, and faintly, a heavenly music was coming out. So beautiful. Yu-er's eyes were shining. She looked at the seven-colored rainbow in the distance and asked, Master, why is there a rainbow there? There seems to be the sound of someone playing a zither there. It's so nice to hear. Qing Emperor looked into the distance and slowly said with his hands behind his back, it's the strange phenomenon in the sky when Mo Chen is about to ascend. Hearing this, Hao, and Mu Chen also looked into the distance and couldn't help but smile. Uncle Mo Chen was finally going to ascend. At the same time, at the peak of the heavenly mountain, after the last bolt of lightning struck, the surrounding spiritual energy surged and a whirlpool appeared in the sky. The whirlpool was not the usual grayish-white and black color, but a bright rainbow color. It was as if a rainbow had formed a ring of clouds that extended from the sky towards Mo Chen. Among the clouds, celestial music was playing. It was very pleasant to listen to, and the immortal magpies circled around the seven-colored clouds. It was a beautiful sight to behold. Fengjiu stood up, her eyes filled with joy and excitement. She looked at the white-robed Mo Chen standing in front of her, his sleeves fluttering in the wind. She looked at the smile on his lips. Divine light enveloped his body, and divine qi spread out. She looked at the elegant and gentle smile on his fairy-like face as he looked at her. She looked at his white figure, which was reflected by the divine qi in the whirlpool, and his figure flew into the sky. Mo Chen, take care. We'll meet again in the future. She raised her voice and waved at him. A happy smile bloomed on her beautiful face. Chapter 4765. Following his successful ascension, the seven-colored vortex that appeared in the sky gradually closed up as if it had never appeared in the first place. However, at this moment, almost all the cultivators in the various realms noticed this. Even though he had only ascended for an instant, the appearance of the celestial music and the strange phenomenon in the sky made it difficult for them to ignore. Fengjiu stood at the peak of Sky Mountain and looked at the surroundings that had returned to normal. Then, he turned around and looked at the cave behind him. He thought of Tian Jizi and Mo Chen. Now, Tian Jizi had died to save Mo Zhe, and Mo Chen had also ascended to the ninth heaven. Now, there was no one here. Perhaps, in a few years or decades, this place would be forgotten. Thinking of this, she was slightly moved. Her gaze fell on a rock that was half the height of a person not far away. She slowly walked over. With a move of her hand, the Qingfeng sword appeared in her hand. She injected spiritual energy into the sword in her hand and the sword moved at will. She carved the words, Immortal Peak, on the rock that was half the height of a person. Then, she carved smaller words at the bottom, indicating that the master of Sky Mountain, Tian Jizi's disciple, Nalan Mo Chen, had ascended to the ninth heaven. Finally, the person who carved the words was the ghost Dr. Fengjiu. She did not leave immediately. Instead, she prepared to stay here for a few more days. Because if she left this time, she probably would not come back again. In Upper Immortal World, Qing Emperor brought along his three disciples and arrived at a floating island located in the clouds. Upon entering that island, Yu-er couldn't help but look all around with novelty. She felt that this place was filled with immortal qi, and was very beautiful. Master, this place is so beautiful. It's like a fairyland. It's so beautiful. Yu said as she looked at the scenery filled with clouds. This is the fief of immortal Lingmu. He is a reclusive immortal. Although this island is not very big, it is rich in spiritual energy and surrounded by celestial aura. It is very famous. Emperor Qing said slowly as he walked forward unhurriedly. When they arrived at the entrance, several immortal servants bowed to them. At this time, Emperor Qing handed over an invitation. The immortal servant opened it and took a look. Then, he closed it and bowed respectfully again. Greetings, Emperor Qing. The white-robed and handsome immortal looked at the lotus arch in front of him. He smiled and gestured for him to enter. Lotus arch, please come in. My immortal father is waiting for you inside. The lotus arch nodded slightly. Then, he led his 3 disciples and followed an immortal envoy who was leading the way. At that place, the immortals were sitting and chatting happily. A white-haired old man stroked his beard and said with a smile, ? Immortal Lingmu, I heard that the Azure Emperor will be attending the banquet as well. Is that true? Will the Azure Emperor come as well? He doesn't like to attend banquets. Many people want to invite him, but they can't. Immortal Elder Lingmu, you really are a big shot. A purple-robed man sitting on the other side said, his eyes full of surprise. Chapter 4766. Oh. I see. No wonder you told us to bring our juniors along. I see. Another person laughed, seemingly very interested in the Azure Emperor's arrival. Back then, Emperor Qing took in a disciple. However, that disciple died in a tribulation. I didn't expect that he would take in 3 more disciples. However, there are many people who want to become Emperor Qing's disciples but don't have the chance. Thinking about it, the 3 disciples he took in must be extraordinary. Coincidentally, I can take this opportunity to meet them today, Immortal Lingmu said with a smile, looking at the juniors sitting behind their master. The Azure Emperor's disciples must be extraordinary. It's a rare opportunity to meet them. We naturally can't miss it. Everyone laughed, looking forward to it. Meanwhile, outside, the Azure Supreme Arch and his group were walking slowly towards the palace. They were walking on a small stone path. There were strange flowers and fruits on both sides. A cool breeze blew past, and the fragrance of flowers and fruits assailed their nostrils. Even Hao, and the other 2 had never seen such a place before. They felt as if all the pores on their bodies were open to breathe. It was extremely comfortable. After walking for a long distance, they finally arrived at an arched door formed by flower vines. Bright and beautiful flowers were blooming on the arched door, and there were 4 outstanding immortal servants standing at the arched door. When they saw them arrive, the 4 of them slightly bent their knees and bowed. And from inside, a loud voice sounded. The Azure Emperor has arrived. The people who were sitting and chatting inside all stood up with smiles on their faces when they heard the honorific title of the newcomer. Even Immortal Lingmu stood up with a smile and walked to the arched door. When he saw Emperor Qing, who was still as handsome as ever, Immortal Lingmu smiled and cupped his hands. Emperor Qing, long time no see. You're still as elegant as ever. Immortal Lingmu. The Azure Emperor returned the greeting with a faint smile on his face. He looked at the others and nodded slightly. He cupped his hands and said, fellow immortals. Greetings, Azure Emperor. No one dared to accept his greeting. They leaned slightly to the side and accepted half of his greeting before returning the greeting. After all, their statuses were different, so they naturally couldn't be treated the same. Even though the Azure Arch lived in seclusion and did not care about worldly affairs, he was still a great emperor of a region. He was not someone they could act impudently toward. Thus, when they saw him, they all had to respectfully bow and lower themselves to him. We were just talking about Great Emperor Qing when he arrived. These 3 must be Great Emperor Qing's new disciples. Immortal Lingmu and Emperor Qing were close friends, so his tone was casual and natural, unlike the others. His gaze went past Emperor Qing and landed on the 3 children behind him. He was a little surprised that the 3 new disciples of Emperor Qing were so young. Yes, these 3 little fellows have been with me for a year. As the lotus the arch spoke, his expression softened when he mentioned his 3 disciples. He turned slightly to the side and looked at the 3 of them. Come forward and greet immortal elder Ling Mu and the immortal lords. Hearing this, the 3 of them walked out from behind him and gracefully bowed to immortal Ling Mu. Yun Chen. Yun Yuan. Yun Qi. Greetings, immortal elder Ling Mu and the immortal lords. The 3 of them spoke at the same time. Even though they were still young, their manners were natural, their words were clear, and their expressions were natural. They immediately won the favor of the crowd. Chapter 47-67. Immortal Ling Mu asked casually. He thought that since these 3 children were so extraordinary and had such a sense of propriety at such a young age, they must be from a prestigious family. That was why he asked such a question. Unexpectedly, the Lotus Supreme Thearcha's next words stunned him. Once they become my disciples, they will only be disciples of the Cloud Sky Mountain. Their families have nothing to do with them, so there's no need to mention them, the Lotus Supreme the Arch said slowly. The Azure the Arch said slowly with a calm expression. He was probably the only one who dared to speak like this among all the people present. Everyone wanted to know which family these 3 children were from. Unexpectedly, when they heard this, they were stunned for a moment. They looked at each other and smiled at the same time. This was indeed the Lotus Supreme Thearcha's style. After becoming the Lotus Supreme Thearcha's disciples, it was best not to mention the families of the 3 children. Otherwise, who knew what kind of commotion it would cause? After all, if they could become the Lotus Supreme Thearcha's disciples, their families would also rise along with them. Yes, yes, yes. There's no need to mention it. Come, come, come. This is the first time the Lotus Supreme the Arch has brought you here. I'll give you these 3 items as a greeting gift, Immortal Ling Mu said with a smile. He took out 3 immortal artifacts and handed them to the 3 children. The 3 children could not help but look at their master, unsure if they should accept them. Since it's a gift from Immortal Ling Mu, you should accept it, the Lotus Supreme the Arch said, gesturing for the 3 children to accept it. Yes, the 3 children replied. After receiving the gifts, they bowed again. Thank you, Immortal Ling Mu. You're welcome, Immortal Ling Mu said with a smile. He gestured for the Lotus Supreme the Arch to take a seat and said, Lotus Supreme the Arch, please. He personally invited the Lotus Supreme the Arch to take a seat and sat with him. Hao and the other 2 followed suit and sat behind their master, just like the others. As they sat down, the others also sat down. The immortal servants came forward to pour wine. Celestial music sounded again, and a few beautiful fairies danced in the middle. For a moment, laughter filled the air. Lotus Supreme the Arch, we saw someone from the lower realm ascending to become an immortal today. Does the Lotus Supreme the Arch know who it is? An elder asked. Those who ascended directly from the lower realm did not become immortal lords like them. Instead, they ascended directly to become great emperors. Their statuses were far above them. However, even with their powers, they were unable to find out who had ascended to become an immortal. Everyone knows that I don't care about worldly affairs. If I'm not in my cave, I'm in closed-door cultivation. Therefore, I only know that someone has become an immortal today, but I don't know who it is, Emperor Qing said slowly. He raised the wine cup in front of him and took a sip of the spiritual wine. I didn't expect there to be so many talented cultivators in the mortal world. Some time ago, someone also ascended to the immortal world to experience the tribulation, but he failed and died. I didn't expect that after a year, someone from the mortal world would ascend to the immortal world. It's really surprising. I heard that in the lower realm, there is a female immortal who is extremely powerful and has outstanding talent. Not only that, because of her superb medical skills in alchemy, she is respectfully called the Ghost Doctor. Her name is Fengzhou. Chapter 47-68. Emperor Qing narrowed his eyes and sipped his wine. He didn't seem to be interested in what they were talking about. He didn't say anything and only listened as he leisurely drank his wine. Behind him, the three children's eyes flashed when they heard them mention their mother. They glanced at the purple-robed man who spoke and sized him up carefully. He looked to be in his 30s. Although he didn't look very old, according to their masters, he was already a pile of old bones. Taking advantage of this moment, they took a look at the juniors who were sitting quietly behind their respective masters. Almost all of them were in their teens or 20s. Only one old man had a 17 or 18-year-old youth and a 10-year-old boy behind him. Immortal Lingmu continued the purple-robed celestial master's words and smiled. Whether that ghost Dr. Fengjiu is as good as the rumors say, I believe we will find out in the future. Come, come, come. Everyone, let this old man toast you all. Thank you all for coming to this old man's place. As he spoke, he raised his wine cup with both hands and gestured to everyone. Seeing this, everyone also raised their wine cups and bowed. Immortal Lingmu is too kind. It is our honor to have the opportunity to come here. Everyone chatted and drank. After a while, the dancing maidservant left. Emperor Qing looked at Immortal Lingmu and slowly said, Immortal Lingmu, since everyone has brought their disciples here, why don't we borrow Immortal Lingmu's flower water moon spirit land and let them have a competition? Hearing this, everyone's hearts trembled. They couldn't help but look at Immortal Lingmu. Would he agree? One had to know that the flower, water, moon, and spirit realm was a good place. If they could let their disciples go in and gain experience, it would be a great blessing. It would be extremely helpful to their cultivation. The juniors didn't know what kind of place it was, so they only looked at each other and then at Emperor Qing. They didn't expect him to make such a request. But what kind of place was that? Even if the spiritual would immortal agreed, would the three children behind the Lotus Supreme the Arch be able to compete with them? Wouldn't that be a little too arrogant? Immortal Lingmu stroked his beard and laughed. He shook his head and smiled. I knew it. Emperor Qing hasn't come out for so many years. Why would you agree to my invitation? So that's why you came. He glanced at the three children behind Emperor Qing, and his eyes were full of smiles. He was not annoyed by Emperor Qing's request. Instead, he said, it's rare that everyone is here. It's fine to let these juniors in. However, Emperor Qing, your three disciples are the youngest here. Can you let them in without worry? Of course. Immortal Lingmu. Chapter 4769. That whip was truly a celestial treasure that had been passed down since ancient times. It was not something an ordinary celestial artifact could compare to. Moreover, it was said that the 9-section red flame phoenix scale whip was also known as the god-beating whip. Even cultivators with decent cultivation would find it difficult to withstand a single lash from it. Furthermore, the whip would cause one's skin to burn, and ordinary medicine would not be able to cure it. It could be said that it was an ancient divine whip that everyone knew about. However, that whip had always been with Immortal Lingmu. Everyone had only heard of it but had never seen it before. Immortal Lingmu smiled and looked at Emperor Qing. Oh, you. It's rare for you to come here. So, you're here for my treasure. He chuckled and looked at Emperor Qing meaningfully. He said, that treasure is in the mirror flower, water, and moon spirit land. My master left it there. Even I can't take it out. If someone really does take it out, I'll give it to them. He smiled and looked at the immortal lords. Everyone, it's rare for Emperor Qing to be so interested. Even if I don't agree, it's different. I wonder if your disciples would like to go in and give it a try. It's rare to have such an opportunity. It's also their opportunity. Here, we thank Immortal Lingmu on their behalf. Everyone stood up and bowed to him with cupped fists. All right, since that's the case, please follow me. He stood up with a smile and looked at everyone. At this moment, the Lotus the Arch also stood up and followed Old Man Lingmu with the three little fellows behind him. After walking for a while, they stopped in front of a mirror stone that had the mirror flower, water and moon spirit realm engraved on it. Immortal Lingmu looked at everyone and said, "This is where the mirror flower, water and moon spirit realm is. However, the strength of those who enter will be suppressed. The stronger one is, the harder it will be to move around inside." He smiled and waved his sleeves. Petals flew down and turned into rays of light that entered the arms of the juniors. A beautiful flower petal appeared on the inside of each of their arms. Once you're inside, if the petals on your arms are cut, the bleeding will disappear and you'll be brought out. Similarly, if you can't hold on any longer and want to come out, cut your skin where the petals are. As long as blood oozes out, you'll come out. Do you understand? Immortal Lingmu looked at everyone and asked. Understood. Everyone responded respectfully. There's one thing you have to remember. If you die inside, you'll really die inside. So, if you have no other choice, you have to remember what I said. The petals on your arms will be your lifeline. Immortal Lingmu said again, looking deeply at them. Yes. Everyone replied again. Immortal Lingwood flicked his sleeve, and the seemingly ordinary spirit stone mirror instantly emitted a gentle light. A vortex also appeared on the mirror. Go in. Without giving their master a chance to instruct them, Immortal Lingwood waved his sleeve, and all the juniors were swept into it. As they entered, the surface of the spirit stone mirror returned to normal. Seeing this, everyone looked at each other. There were some things they didn't have time to instruct. But now, all of them had entered. When they thought of this, they felt as if there was something stuck in their hearts. It was very uncomfortable. Chapter 4770. Forget it. So what? This was also their own good fortune. They would just have to wait and see. Everyone, why don't we return to the front to drink and enjoy ourselves? Immortal Lingmu smiled as he looked at the crowd. Everyone looked at each other, and only then did they respond, and walked back with him. Emperor Qing and Immortal Lingmu walked side by side in the front, while the others walked behind. Perhaps they were worried about their disciples, as they walked in a daze, as if they were thinking about something. Immortal Lingmu glanced at Emperor Qing and smiled. Emperor Qing, aren't you worried about the three of them? After all, they are so young. Even I am a little worried when I see them. It was precisely because of their young age that he saw the three children holding hands when he sent the juniors into the mirror flower, water, moon spirit land. Therefore, he didn't separate them and sent them directly into the mirror flower, water and moon spirit land. Who knew what would happen to such young children if they were separated? He and Emperor Qing had been friends for many years. Forget it, forget it. He would take it as taking care of them. Emperor Qing's lips curled up slightly when he heard that. He said unhurriedly, although the three of them are young, they are very intelligent. I am not worried. As he spoke, he turned to look at Immortal Lingmu with a smile on his face. You should worry about that whip of yours. Ha 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 ha. Immortal Lingmu laughed heartily. His eyes were full of smiles, and it was obvious that he was very happy. He said, that treasure has been with me for a long time, and there are many people who have designs on it. But how many years has it been? No one has been able to enter the mirror flower, water and moon spiritual land to retrieve it. As he spoke, he stroked his beard and said with a smile, if your three disciples can really take it out, then I'll give you the whip. I'll also give you a set of whip technique books that my master left behind. How about that? All right, it's a deal. Emperor Qing smiled. Just don't regret it. Sigh, I am a dignified immortal. My words carry enormous weight. Why would I regret it? As long as your three disciples can get it, I will fulfill my promise. He laughed and felt that Emperor Qing's three disciples would not be able to get the whip. Not to mention Emperor Qing's three disciples, even other disciples would not be able to get it. If that treasure could be obtained so easily, it would not have been called an ancient treasure. At this moment, it would not still be with him. Therefore, he was completely at ease. He simply felt that those juniors entering were just going through the motions. After all, most of their disciples only followed their master around most of the time. When they were training on their own, they were still relatively young. Moreover, they were still in his catoptric deflection realm. Hearing this, Emperor Qing only smiled and did not say anything else. Celestial Elder Lingwood had never expected that he would miscalculate one day, at the same time, in the Mirror Flower Water Moon spirit realm. After everyone was sent in, they scattered. Only Hao, Mu Chen, and Mu Yu landed alone. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.